Now, Richmond isn't the largest, busiest, or most confusing city in Virginia, but for pedestrians, it is the most dangerous. In 2025, Richmond's pedestrian death rate per capita was the highest in the state. The city recorded 13 pedestrian deaths, which follows only Fairfax County's 14 pedestrian deaths, even though their population is about 5 times larger than ours. But most of these crashes did not occur randomly. For years, they've been clustered in the same roads, near the same neighborhoods, affecting the same populations. I was able to talk to some transportation experts about it, and they basically said that these dangerous patterns aren't just coincidences, they're consequences of how the city was built and who it was built for. Dr. Aaron Robbins is a cognitive scientist at the University of Richmond and former research psychologist for the National Highway Safety Administration. And so when I was able to speak with her, she identified a few different factors that contribute to pedestrian injuries and deaths. And she put them in different buckets, is what she called it. And that is design, behavior, and enforcement. As far as design goes, that applies to both street design and vehicle design. Cars and trucks have gotten bigger over the years. They've got wider A-pillars, which are basically the upright support posts on each side of the windshield. And that reduces visibility. And then just the sheer size of these vehicles increases power on impact, which can be especially dangerous in very vehicle-centric cities like Richmond. The presence of barriers like sidewalks and crosswalks, or lack thereof, is also highly predictive of pedestrian injuries, something the city often lacks along its major corridors. However, the highest indicator of pedestrian severe injury or death is speed.
Because of the fact that we don't have rush hour traffic, we aren't, a traffic heavy city, sure, people are going to speed.
So even with the implementation of more constraints and guardrails, people are gonna mess up. So according to Robbins, part of a pedestrian-friendly infrastructure is countermeasures, which are design systems that basically anticipate bad driving behaviors by slowing people down, which reduces the chance of severe injury or death. Virginia Commonwealth University, or VCU, for example, implemented modular curbs at 4 on-campus intersections in 2025 in order to reduce left turn speeds and prevent drivers from corner cutting. And these countermeasures also provide more space and visibility for pedestrians to walk a little bit further out to check for cars before they cross.
Most of the time, when we look at behavior and pedestrian injury, it's usually driver that's causing the problems. A lot of times it's impaired driving. A lot of times it's distracted driving.
And then the most common and effective countermeasure that addresses behavior is enforcement. And that has remained relatively lax across the city since its staggering reductions during COVID-19.
We have to understand how people behave on the roads first, right? In order to create those guardrails and those systems that work for people.
But it's hard to pin Richmond's grim pedestrian incident rates on just one of these buckets individually. According to Robbins, it's usually a combination of multiple factors that lead to differences between different cities, different rates, as well as disparities between different populations in the same city. So 3 out of 4 of Richmond's severe crashes take place at a fraction of its roads. These roads are a part of what transportation experts are calling the high injury network, which classifies them as the worst for pedestrian safety, according to Andy Baino, which is RDOT's director, which is a recently formed Richmond Department of Transportation. And then some of the most dangerous hotspots in Richmond can be found along Chamberlain, Hull Street, Midlothian Turnpike, Forest Hill Road, Belvedere Street, and Broad Street. And so you can kind of see alarming patterns emerge from high injury network crash data. And it's these deadly corridors are mostly concentrated within low-income areas and formerly redlined communities, according to research from Partnership for Smarter Growth nonprofit organization here in Richmond. I was able to speak with their coordinator for strategy and outreach, which is Mr. Finn Pollard, while composing the story, who kind of explained to me that Richmond is still a deeply segregated city both by race and socioeconomic status. So if you look at heat maps, which they had, and I was able to look at, and I will try to show them on here. If you look at heat maps of where there are pedestrian fatalities, by and large, it's in areas that are poor or predominantly brown or black communities. There's a huge correlation there. In the 1930s, neighborhoods were given a grade of A through D for mortgage security, with race and ethnicity being the largest determinants of that grade. So this racially motivated practice is called redlining today. And for decades, these redlined maps were used to deny mortgages to Black Americans and reinforce segregation throughout cities. Today, many of these formerly redlined areas are still engulfed in the aftermath. They're interwoven with poverty and inequity, like the construction of high-speed corridors that lack pedestrian-friendly infrastructure that surround or directly cut through their communities. And the disparities between road safety and race are not unique to Richmond. According to a 2021 study by the Governor's Highway Association, Black people had the second highest rate of total traffic deaths, which include regular in-a-car traffic deaths, and also pedestrian traffic deaths and bicyclist traffic deaths. And that's of any race behind Indigenous people, who took the #1 spot, unfortunately. But Pollard said that folks who don't have as much money get pushed to areas that are less safe for pedestrians. And that's compounded by the fact that when someone is lower income, it's harder for them to own a car. And some, like Pollard himself, have to avoid driving for health reasons. When he was a teenager, Pollard developed narcolepsy, which is a sleep disorder that makes it dangerous for him to drive. So today, if he wants to get almost anywhere from his apartment, he has to either cross Broad Street or Belvedere or both. And he told me that every time he has to cross these wide, roaring roads, he's quietly wondering, like, if he's going to make it to the other side, okay, or not, you know? And sadly, it makes him feel less connected to his community, he said. You know, he doesn't feel safe walking, but that's his only option, really. And believe it or not, mental health and daily stressors are also a huge factor in roadway safety. And with Richmond ranking second in the nation for at least 3 years running now, as far as I know, Pollard said that many residents' minds are likely elsewhere from the road, like basic needs and survival. And the Virginia Department of Health concurs. You know, they had a 2024 community health assessment that looked at Richmond City and Henrico County. And basically what the findings were is that our collective mental health status is pretty bleak. Richmond's rates of suicide and self-harm were found to be over 2 times higher than Virginia's average. And in 2021, overdose deaths in Richmond were over 3 times higher than Virginia's average. The report's key findings states that there is an increased demand for mental health services, a growing need for neurodivergent assessments, rising trauma, especially in the African American community, and the need for culturally competent care for the LGBTQ plus community. Transportation issues were also cited as being one of the main barriers in accessing healthcare, including mental health care. And that's a burden that disproportionately falls to Richmond's most vulnerable residents. Pollard said that for Black and Brown communities or folks with disabilities, the way that the built landscape is reflects existing systemic inequities. It's both a manifestation of those inequities, but it also has a doubling effect on them. So Richmond saw a spike in fatalities earlier this year, but since February, no pedestrian deaths have been recorded in the city. And even with the spike, Andy Bano, our DOT director, said that the overall trend for pedestrian safety is looking very promising. Part of Richmond's Vision Zero action plan, which is a global strategy that the city adopted as part of its goal to eliminate all pedestrian and traffic fatalities, is combining forces with multiple authorities from outside the realm of transportation professionals, including healthcare professionals.
So part of our work as transportation professionals is at least being aware of that and then highlighting, identifying it to people who can do something about it.
According to Bano, RDOT has a budget of about $1.2 billion to allocate to transportation safety projects over the next 5 or 6 years, none of which, he said, will go to expanding car infrastructure. If the status quo is to pump as many cars as possible through a roadway as fast as possible, which is usually the case, Bano said the city's approach is going to be the exact opposite, with people being at the center of the universe.
We're doing what we can to make everything calm and safe for human beings, so that when someone does make a mistake behind the wheel, it doesn't end with the tragedy. It doesn't end with a severe injury.
And on the physical side of things, Bano said the city is prioritizing rebuilding portions of high injury network roads, many of which, like Whole Street, are South Side. And then within the variety of different projects that they have planned or that they are actively engaged with, he said that the focus is on bringing down vehicle speeds and increasing options for people of all ages and abilities to navigate the city safely.
That's transportation equity. You have to be able to make prioritization decisions. You have to say these two things, there are valid concerns. There are 1,000 concerns about the built environment, but they're not equally important.
RDOT recently installed speed tables on Midlothian Turnpike, along with other parts of our high injury network corridors. And Belvedere Street is currently getting its first batch of red light cameras, according to Bano.
We will never stop improving the built environment, and it's working. Like when you include enforcement, it's working.
But Bano said that the underlying problem is out of RDOT's control.
Local land use rules are this major villain towards public health. Street design, bad as it is in the status quo, street design is like a henchman of the villain.
Land use regulations determine how private and public land can be developed and used. So land is divided into specific zones with specific purposes like residential, commercial, industrial, or agricultural. And those assignments, I guess, dictate what activities are allowed in a given parcel.
Like if we truly want to have neighborhoods where anyone has the freedom to walk or ride a bike or use a bus or drive, then you've got to be able to legalize these things in close proximity, because if people don't have these things within close proximity, then they have no choice but to travel miles and miles to get there.
In the meantime, Bano said that its department will stay focused on a people-first approach to infrastructure and hearing the issues of those who haven't had a voice in decades. One way that RDOT aims to facilitate this is through its community engagement division, where its goal is to educate first, engage second, but also approach and engage everyone, Bano told me. Overall, Bano is eager and optimistic.
The data is encouraging. Like
It is.
We are trending in a good direction.
Mm-hmm.
Things get better in the end. We are in a good place, and it's getting better.
But Pollard's goals, on the other hand, are a bit more straightforward. He had a great quote, and I think that sums it up better than anything I can say. So, Pollard told me, what I want in life is just to feel safe and comfortable being able to walk over to a friend's house and feel connected to community. I think most folks at the end of the day want to feel secure and connected to other people, and the way that we design our transportation networks do not allow it. That is all from me. If you stuck around to the very end, thank you so much. Hope you learned a thing or two. I learned a whole lot while reporting on this. And I'll be back at some point with some other topic, probably soon. And I will put the link to the full article in the comments, so be sure to check it out. Thanks again.